In today's video, we're taking a look at the future of Pierre-Luc Dubois. If he does become available, where might he end up as a trade this offseason? Plus, we also want to look at the Vegas Golden Knights, who are now officially out of the playoffs. What went wrong this season, and what tough decisions will they have to make, as they have a lot of tough cap decisions as well. Plus, we have a resignation in Pittsburgh that's substantial, a signing in Winnipeg, and more injury updates as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to look forward to here in the offseason to talk about today. First up, let's talk about a signing in Winnipeg. This could be a very important player for Winnipeg here in the next few years. They've signed 2021 first-round pick Chaz Lucius, who's a pretty offensively talented player, plays center ice. He played this past year at the University of Minnesota, where he put up 19 points in 24 games. Certainly had a pretty decent season for his draft plus 1 year. Obviously, I think next year will be determined where he plays based on what the Jets do. They're going to have a lot of interesting decisions to make. We know this is a team that certainly did not meet expectations this year, as we've talked about. We are going to discuss the future of Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think you could throw in Mark Scheifele as being a question mark, what his future holds as well. And obviously, depending on what kind of openings that roster ends up with, I don't know if we'll see Lucius this year or if he ends up playing a year in the American League first, but he's officially signed, turning pro. He will be either at the NHL or AHL level next season. A couple updates on some injuries. Columbus is going to be without Zach Werenski as well as Blankenberg, so certainly a couple holes in the blue line for their last little bit here. Werenski ends up with a broken nose, so he's not going to be playing, and Blankenberg blocked a shot in their last game and suffered an upper body injury. So really, considering playoffs are not happening, their season's pretty much over. There's no point in trying to play through an injury at this point in the year. And Alex Ovechkin in Washington has been spotted on the ice today in practice in a regular jersey, so that's promising. Doesn't mean for sure that he's going to play, but the Caps do have 2 games remaining. They play back-to-back tonight and tomorrow night to finish out their season. Obviously, they'll have a shot here at either remaining in a wild card spot, or could they move up and take Pittsburgh down and finish in the 3rd spot? I mean, they know they have a playoff spot secured, but where do they finish? We don't know, and I would not be surprised if Ovi ends up playing one of these games. I wouldn't be shocked if he maybe sits one out and plays the other or something to that effect. But he's a very competitive person, wants to hit a lot of personal milestones. And if he's able to play, he's probably going to want to. Really not a lot of clarity on UC Saros in Nashville. I heard Coach John Hines talking about it earlier today. And there really wasn't a ton of clarity. All we really know is that they've called up a goaltender to finish out the regular season, and we don't know if he's going to be available yet. So, of course, going into the playoffs, we have some question marks in goal in Nashville with Saros, in Carolina with Freddie Anderson, Tristan Jarry. So there's some, key goaltenders that, may or may not be available and could certainly have a major impact on their team's success or lack thereof. So I guess we'll see where that goes here. The NHL's regular season, of course, wraps up pretty much, you could say, Friday, but there is a 1 game that was rescheduled the day after, which is the Kraken versus the Winnipeg Jets, due to that snowstorm that came in, obviously in April in Winnipeg, which was not, something you normally would see cause a disruption to the schedule. But at the end of the day, it's not going to count for much of anything, but they will play the game out. But any games with playoff implications will be done as of Friday night. Now, we also had I found this news a little bit interesting, the timing of it. There may not be anything more to it, but Penguins CEO David Morehouse has announced that he's stepping down. The Penguins announced that he's done with the club after 16 years. He's had quite a run. The team has been extremely successful during his tenure there. I think he certainly played a role in that as well. Apparently, President of Hockey Ops, Brian Burke, and Kevin Acklin, who's the COO, will be taking over the running of the day-to-day team and business activities here for the rest of the year until they decide to appoint somebody else in this spot. But certainly Morehouse has been there, like I said, 16 years. He started off as a consultant and then worked his way up, eventually making it to CEO. But during his tenure, he was instrumental in helping them get their new arena. Obviously, they had a record sellout streak of 633 games from 2007 to 2021. They've made the playoffs every single year that he was there. Obviously, during the early days, getting Malkin, Crosby, and Letang, and those guys up in, into the organization certainly was a big help. But obviously, David Morehouse had a very successful run there in Pittsburgh. I only question the timing of it because it's just before the end of the regular season, heading into the playoffs. Normally, you'd see something like that at the end of the playoffs, whenever their season is officially done, whether that be, in a couple weeks at the end of the first round, or they go all the way, or what have you. So the timing just seems a little bit odd, but maybe there's something more to it on a personal level. All he kind of said for a comment that I seen at least was that he was looking forward to having more family time and things like that, which is really what you'd expect. And maybe he's kind of deciding to head off into retirement, and I guess maybe just didn't want to wait. I just hope that there's nothing, health-wise or anything else that we don't know that might have impacted the decision to do it now instead of, finishing up the year and making the announcement then. But certainly had a terrific run, and hopefully everything is good with him moving forward. Now, of course, we saw a lot of playoff implications last night, and we get the final spot determined. The Vegas Golden Knights are out. The Dallas Stars are in, but the Dallas Stars didn't do themselves any favor. They had a 3-0 lead on the Coyotes, and they blew it, losing in overtime. So that's certainly not the way that they expected to do that. And I was kind of scoreboard watching myself, watching bits and pieces, flipping between the games. And Vegas wasn't looking the greatest last night either. I thought they at times looked a little timid. Certainly not getting a lot out of their top people. The third straight game that they lost in a shootout, which they really needed to win a regulation, which I'm not sure. I think it would have made a difference anyways, to be honest, because I think with Dallas, say that the Coyotes would have come back and won in regulation, I believe they still would have been out, but I can't check. Don't have the standings right in front of me, so don't quote my math on that. But either way, it's not good for the Vegas Golden Knights. It's the first time in their history that they're going to miss the playoffs. They've had a lot of adversity this year, which I know the organization and I'm sure a lot of their fans that were newer to hockey have not necessarily dealt with before, but they are not making it. You have to wonder if the Jack Eichel trade, was it the right thing to do? And if you look at the standings, or the records, I should say, between Vegas and Buffalo since the Eichel trade, like since Jack Eichel came back to play, the Buffalo Sabres have actually done slightly better than Vegas. And looking at where they are in the standings and what you'd expect out of each franchise, you wouldn't think we'd be having that conversation saying that would be the case, that Buffalo actually performed better than Vegas after Eichel was able to play from like February on, or whatever the date was. I can't remember the exact date he made his triumphant return after the disc replacement surgery. Thankfully, it worked out well for him, and I know he wanted out of Buffalo. And longer term, that deal could still work out wonderfully for Vegas. I mean, Jack Eichel is still a heck of a player, but early on, it's not showing, to get that it's getting a lot of results here. Mark Stone, obviously after signing that big long-term deal, I love Mark Stone. He's a heck of a player. You could tell he's not 100%. He's playing even though he probably shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, if that back issue lingers, that contract could prove problematic. So the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have a lot of tough decisions to make here. The Dallas Stars are in. We don't know exactly where they're going to be yet, because they pick up the point in Nashville loss. They did pick up the jump the spot here, so they're wildcard 1 now, where Nashville's wildcard 2, but that's not guaranteed to stay that way. They could flip-flop here yet again. We don't know if Dallas is getting Colorado or Calgary, in which the other one will play the Predators. We do know that the Kings and Oilers are going to play. We know that the Wild and Blues are going to play. And that's about it. The Eastern standings are not guaranteed either, because Pittsburgh and Washington could flip-flop. We know in the East, like in the Atlantic, we know Florida's 1, Toronto's 2, but we don't know for sure who's 3. Will it be Tampa? Most likely, but theoretically it could still be Boston. So they could flip-flop too. And we know in the Metro, it's going to be Carolina, the Rangers, 1-2. But we don't know, is it going to be Pittsburgh or Washington 3? So all those matchups are still up for grabs between tonight and tomorrow. They will all be determined. So on the weekend, we'll have confirmation of all of our playoff series. And that's when I'll do my big playoff preview and make some predictions and see what we can do for that. Predictions don't always work out, but we always try every year just for fun. Of course, with the games last night as well, the Montreal Canadiens picked up a victory against the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden, and even by winning, because the Coyotes also won. I'm I'm not sure if you want to call it winning, but they clinched last place in the NHL. So it's now guaranteed they will be 32nd overall at the end of the year. So that means they have the best odds at the first overall pick in the 2022 NHL draft, which of course will be held in Montreal. So that would be huge for them if they could get the pick in their, while hosting in their home city. So we will see. It is the first time, though, I believe in NHL history that you've seen an NHL club go from being in the Stanley Cup final to last. So it's not something you see very common. You've seen them go from the final to missing the playoffs, but not be dead last. And of course, this is the first, we've only had a short stretch here, not, with 32 teams, right? It's only 2 years. So not many teams have been 32nd in the NHL standings, but that's certainly, when it comes to Montreal and losing as much as, I'm sure some people will make fun of them and all that. And that's just the way it goes. Every fan base kind of taunts the other ones, but at the same time, if you're going to be bad and miss the playoffs, you might as well be really bad and get the first overall pick, right? So we'll see how this works out. And if they end up getting Shane Wright or what have you, will the same thing possibly happen next year where they can go for Connor Bedard? A little bit of pain short term might be well worth it long term, but will they do that, or will they take a different approach? We don't know exactly how aggressive Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are going to be to turn this thing around. We do know they're expected to go into a deeper rebuild, but if there's some right pieces available, which we'll kind of transition here to our next segment, talking about the future of Pierre-Luc Dubois in Winnipeg. Obviously, a French-born Canadian center iceman with big potential, still early in his career. Elliot Friedman's put it out there lately that, it's not quite clear if he'll sign a long-term contract or not. And if he's not willing to, the Jets might trade him just because of the uncertainty. Not that they don't want him. They'd love to have him long-term because there's also question marks what they might do with Mark Scheifele, and they certainly can't afford to trade them both. And I've seen an article from Montreal Hockey Now indicating that if Pierre-Luc Dubois becomes available and that becomes known, which I would think by the draft would be likely when you know that, if not sooner, that Montreal would be extremely interested. Now, like I said, we talked yesterday about the Montreal rebuild and pieces that are expected to be going. We don't know the future of Carey Price. He may not even play, so he might be on injured reserve. Shea Weber's contract could be traded, but we know he's not playing anymore. We talked about the possibility of trading guys like Brendan Gallagher. Jonathan Drouin's another one. I don't know that they would trade like Josh Anderson, but like Mike Hoffman would be probably available. And there's bound to be a few others. Jeff Petrie is another one that's likely expected to go. So there's lots of things they could do to free up some cap space, make things more flexible, and to get younger and to get some more, assets, either draft capital or young players to help with this rebuild. I mean, that's they're going to do some of that for sure. But does trading for Pierre-Luc Dubois make sense if the Jets decide that they can't get him signed and they're going to try to consider this deal? If you're Montreal, do you like the idea of having Dubois be 1-2 down the middle with Nick Suzuki for the next number of years? Does whether or not they get the first overall pick in the draft play a role in the decision to make that kind of trade? Because if they draft Shane Wright, well, now you have Wright and Suzuki. You add Dubois. I guess having 3 centers is better than 2 or 1 or 0. But, it's a necessary thing that they need, right? Dubois can play the wing, but I think he's better as a pivot in the middle. So with all that being said, if you look at where Montreal is at right now, they have a lot of veteran players, way too many long-term contracts. For a team that's, last in the league and looking to rebuild, it's going to be tough. It might, some people say it could be a year or two before they really fully go into the rebuild because of the contracts that they need to offload and before they can really even see the longer-term vision, which could be the case. It just depends on the movement we see and what all happens this offseason. That's a little bit unpredictable right now. However, with all that in mind, think about what Pierre-Luc Dubois would command for a trade price on the Jets side of things. Are you going to be willing to give up a first-round pick this year or next year? Probably not. You need those picks, especially if you have any shot at Shane Wright or Connor Bedard. So you're not going to want to include a first-round pick, which is probably going to be a must for Winnipeg. You're probably not wanting to include Alex Romanov, arguably your top young defensive prospect, or maybe they don't want Romanov. Maybe they prefer Jordan Harris or something like that. But, do you really want to move one of those young top D? Probably not. Do you want to move Cole Caulfield? I don't think you do. So it's getting, what are you going to give Winnipeg to make them get some value? They're not going to want to take your veteran guys on. They already have their own issues with that. They're not going to want Brendan Gallagher. They're not going to want Jonathan Drouin. They're not going to want Mike Hoffman. That's not going to fly in Winnipeg, right? They would probably want a top youngish D. It would be the starting point. I would think a first-round pick, and I would think, at least one more prospect. And that's just a guess on my part. But, depends on what those other assets are, right? So I just don't know that Montreal's going to want to give that up. They'd kind of take away from their talent and, the pool of either talent or draft capital that they're looking to build with, to take a step back and get Dubois, who's, not old, but he's not 19, 20 years old either. So I don't know if that really makes sense. I understand the allure, but will we see them go a different direction like Gorton did with the Rangers? Like, they initially started to tear it down, but then they used trade and free agency to really accelerate it, and they might be able to do that. But is Dubois the answer? Let me know what you think down in the comments. When it comes to Vegas, what are they going to do with their cap space? Now, this is just an opinion piece on my part here. I don't have any rumors from any particular NHL insider suggesting that one of these players is definitely rumored to be traded, but that Vegas has no choice but to make moves. They're way over the cap when everybody's healthy. So do they move Robin Lehner, who they suddenly have what appears to be a strained relationship with? He's got 3 years left at $5 million. Didn't have the greatest season, but I think between the injuries and the team in front of him, I think you can make an argument that there's still value there. Shea Theodore, I think, would command a lot of value. They probably don't want to move Theodore, but I think he would be a great piece that they could get a good return on. You got Dadonov, who they tried to trade to the Ducks and got rejected. He's got one more year at $5 million. And even though he played really well after he got back to the team when the trade was first rejected, once he rejoined them, he was hot there for a while, but then he was cold down the stretch when it mattered most. So it wouldn't be surprised me at all if they revisit trading him. You get William Karlsson, $5.9 million for another 6 years. They used to call him Wild Bill. To me, he's more like Mild Bill now. He's still a good player, but he's not the 40 goal scorer when you signed him. So I don't know. Does he have a long-term future? But that's a tough contract to trade, so he's probably going to have to stay. Jonathan Marchessault had a solid year amongst the players who didn't really always perform up to standards, but he scored 29 goals. And he didn't have a career high in points, but he was close, and he was right there with goals. He had a 30-goal season before, and he had 29 now. So, you ideally don't really want to move him. So it's certainly not the easiest question to answer is what does Vegas do here? But they have no choice but to move somebody, and with the emergence of Logan Thompson, who they can have much cheaper than any other goaltender right now, and the strained relationship of Robin Lehner, I have to think that Lehner might be one of the guys that goes, along with probably Dadonov on a one-year deal. They could shed about over $10 million with that right there. So we'll see what they do, but they're going to be a busy team, and very interesting to see after missing the playoffs for the first time what kind of reaction we get from the organization, not only from the lack of success, the cap situation and everything else, to see what they do. It's going to be a fascinating deal to watch for. So let me know your thoughts on Vegas and what they're going to do as well in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.